This real-side experience would be further developments regarding the species I refer to as the mutants, sounding perhaps a little derogatory and even insulting, but it is a term that best describes them, for each mutant individual would once have been an altogether different body form, another species entirely. But as they became this new species, so the body forms they were would warp and distort, and only loosely resemble that which they were previously. And mutation describes that which has indeed deviated from its initial and inherent expression, in this case through external influences. To recap briefly, my first encounters with the mutants would reveal a particular body type which has the consciousness created and effected ability to convert all other species and body forms to their own kind, to become as mutants also. This is achieved through physical contact. Some of the mutants operate as the forms they once were, at least mechanically, in that they are bipedal, and tend to extend parts of their forms, tendril-like appendages, that should they latch onto other body forms, so the mutation process begins, and shortly thereafter the victim becomes a mutant also. On occasion, the mutants take the forms of blob-like creatures, suggesting that the mutating effect may continue to develop, and ultimately some become as these gelatinous masses, where just like the bipedal versions, physical contact affects the mutation process in others. My impressions are, however, that some retain more or less their basic previous forms, in that they walk on 2 legs, but some are developed in this alternative way, as another means of converting others to their kind, as these blobs are less restricting as a form, in that they can mould their shapes, are less impeded by environmental obstacles, they can split into many parts, etc., and also are able to survive in space, as unlike the bipedal versions, they lack the necessity to breathe air, or whatever the gas the body form they once were previously required. The blob forms far more resilient to external factors, extremes of cold, heat, and so forth, more robust and resilient in their overall design. The mutants, although operating as individual units, are very much similar in nature to the Borg as depicted in Star Trek. They operate as a hive mind collective, with a collective hive mind consciousness, as each individual creates a thought, an idea, an intent, an emotion, so it is instantly made known to all in the collective, as though the idea creating of each becomes that of all. An example of this, species-wise, would be the reptilians. And indeed, realistically, as we all are this one isness everything reality, animating through all consciousness, in fact, this can be construed as a collective, that despite the personal selves thinking they are separated from all others, they actually are directed by this isness, real awareness reality, if the personal self is placed aside, and from that position to stand in the real awareness that we are, so we can access everything all consciousness comprises of, a little like how any collective consciousness operates. However, unlike the reptilians and this everything reality that animates through all consciousness, the mutants have no individuality. Much like the Borg, their idea-creating mechanics have been in fact forfeited, usurped by that which controls the mutant collective. For even though the reptilians do receive idea input from all their kind instantly, they have control of their own idea-generating mechanics, their free will, and even though the is animates through all consciousness with its overall self-recognizing imperative, the personal selves of each real awareness have free will reign over their idea-generating and simulated effected experience. Therefore, after observing for a number of months on the real side the actions of the mutants, it became clear they have a singular objective, that of converting all species to their own. Their ambition in this regard knows no limits, as they have the desire to effectively have all in this simulator as their kind. If this is achievable, who can say, as it's all about agreement on each individual's part. I then, at a certain point, had the opportunity to determine that which dictates the ideas, the impulses, and intents of the mutant collective, that which had seized the free will of every body form that becomes a part of it, and drives this singular mass conversion compulsion. I would be introduced to what revealed itself as the mutant royalty, a small group of what would have been then the original mutants. My efforts in attempting to present the ears to the royalty would ultimately fail, as on one occasion I was granted an audience with them. For naturally, if you can bring the royalty around to decide to step up and become more aware, to assist the guides and Duane, this becomes then the motivation and intent of all the mutants, due to their hive mind collective, free will dictated to nature. And considering the mutants equate to numbers in their trillions, as impressions suggested, and even that may be conservative an estimate, that is rather a large body of agreement that could swing effected simulated experience for all rather drastically. But as I said, I was unsuccessful. But then a later real side experience had me visit the mutants in the area of creation they stem from, their point of origin, an effort again to reach the central royalty of the mutants, a region of creation I called the Black Slime Realm, as this was as it appeared, a dismal area comprising mainly of black ooze as its main feature. I was received very poorly. The mutants would be motivated to attack me. I and my group would never reach the royalty that lurked in the centre of the slime realm, as we rather took on a taint, as it were, a distortion of the environment. We were debilitated as a result, and had to withdraw. But then, more recently, would I encounter the mutants again, and took it upon myself to venture an alternative option of attempting to bring the mutants around. For indeed, as they were locked out of the utilizing of their own free will, really they had little chance of a personal self deciding the intent of his recognition. For unless the royalty set such an intent, this then could not be an intent that could be formulated by any of the individual drone-like mutants. I therefore elected to allow myself to become a mutant converted. This would have me as a part of the collective, other dimensionally, but with my ability and recognition to move into my real awareness, true being state, aside from consciousness, regardless of the consciousness being singular or collective. So this would potentially allow me to operate individually within the mutant collective. That everything I have as is related references that are memory stored, everything I additionally create, thought and intent wise, would be posted automatically, that it becomes known instantly to all in the collective, against the whims and dictates of the displeased royalty. I would learn of the origins of the royalty also, how they were once godlike beings lifetimes ago, how this consciousness design then effected them into a position where they became as the mutant royalty as they are currently, and with the ability to convert other body forms into their kind, and formulate an ever-expanding collective that they controlled. I learned how I once had affiliation with the royalty when they were these god-like beings, and this had then a karmic cause and effect tapline bind that would forever link my consciousness to theirs. Hence why I would have encounters with the mutants, as these karmic ties, these agreements, even as we seek to release them, afford real side doorways into the experiences of others, such as the mutants, and provide an opportunity not only in the facing of these agreements with other beings, but for the presenting of the ears to them, culminating in the moment where the possibility of sharing the ears with the vast multitudes of the mutant collective would avail itself through becoming a part of the mutant collective. And despite physical level repercussions, as the decision impacted the physical body adversely from the real side, after a period of rebalancing, of regaining my real awareness, nowness equilibrium, the physical symptoms abated, and now I was operating as I normally do, going onwards with my process of awareness, only now everything I do, formulate as ideas, intents, etc., in regards to the ears, is known by the mutant collective I am a part of. And now, in this most recent real side experience, I would find myself in my recreated house on the real side, representing my consciousness, a consciousness now connected with all mutants of the collective. In the house with me would be my father, but impressions revealed he was a real guide, as often they assume the forms of parental figures in my experiences, parents, grandparents, etc. Additionally, would be present my sister Lindsay, and I have revealed how despite her showing a promise in regards to awareness and isness recognition potential, she has flip-flopped constantly with her intent, from being real to the little intents of the personal self, and in a recent experience I shared, seems she had been seduced by the dark forces. However, choices, intent, can change, even moment by moment, and it was as though now she had abandoned her intent to operate in a dark force capacity, and the guides had seemingly given her another chance, for she was to accompany me to the dark slime realm of the mutants once again, just to observe. A guide afforded opportunity for her to see more than she previously had, that would allow her further objective views, all as comparisons to recognize the ears by. The basic fundamental reason for all simulated experience, physical and real side. And so, the guide would manifest as though a portal, that which would transport us to the mutants' realm. We could simply have repositioned ourselves there, no portals required, but these details tend to assist with the memory of the experience on waking, a little over-exaggeration in simulated means of travel, etc. We were relocated in the area of creation the mutants reside in, and so it was that here in the dark slime realm, as part of the collective consciousness of the mutants, would I discover another interesting aspect of this species. The dark forces have instilled a kind of simulated program overlap in human consciousness that prevents humans from perceiving through their physical eyes the Earth, and indeed multi-dimensionally the entire simulator as it actually is. For in reality, a great darkness predominates the simulator throughout the life levels of it, but is concealed beneath this filter, this fabricated simulated overlap, a little like the Matrix movie, where the humans see the world as a recreated program, but not as the destroyed and desolated planet it actually is. For indeed, other species, aliens, etc., who lack this simulated consciousness installed overlap, can see the Earth and creation as it is. The Earth is a murky black ball, the life levels shrouded in a darkness. And through a real awareness, as we step into this true reality of ourselves, aside from the consciousness, the programming of it, and including this dark force applied, simulated filter, can we also see creation as it actually is, the darkness that every life level of it comprises of currently, as effected due to the unconsciousness and unawareness of the overall consciousness that affects this simulated realm, as the consciousness overall is the simulator, and the simulator's state of being is a reflection of the extent of a consciousness distortion. The mutant royalty not only had the ability to create their mutant army collective and control the free will of every individual within it, but just as the dark forces have done with humanity, to also install a kind of simulated overlap, that each mutant individual, free will controlled as they might be, cannot see the mutants' home, the area of creation they hail from, as it actually is, as a realm of dark slime, the environment always reflecting the nature of a consciousness as it will, A dark, dismal area rather indicates the consciousness construction of those that reside within it. And so, when I originally visited the mutant slime realm, only I was able to perceive it as it actually was, behind the filtered simulated overlap as provided by the mutant royalty. An overlap that all mutants would be perceiving. However, I was now a part of this mutant collective, but unlike the individual mutants, I recognized the standing as my real awareness position, that I could still maintain the real view of the simulated environments I operate within, but also, if I chose, so I could step into my consciousness, a consciousness now that was part of the mutant collective, and see the mutant realm as they did. And indeed, as Lindsay, the guide, and myself walked through it, it was a vibrant place, almost heavenly in appearance, a little like the designated dark force areas of creation, the astral, mental planes, etc., simulated overlap concealing creation's overall forbidding darkness, as I said. In this case, simulated filtering of the dark slime realm. As the mutants had previously been locked out of the free will utilizing of their idea generating mechanics, even though they were afforded this overlapping heavenly environment when they operated in the region of creation the mutants called home, the environment was rather static, in that it was a standard view and environmental experience for all mutants. For as a part of a collective, the idea created by one would become that shared by all on the real side and other dimensions of life. Were a collective such as this unregulated and undisciplined in idea generating, so the effected simulation for all would be absolute mayhem, a bombardment of effected imagery produced by the trillions that the mutant collective consisted of. This suggests the reptilians have a greater mastery of their idea generating, or as a collective, this simulated mayhem would be the case for them also on the real side. Either that, or they have a mechanism that somehow individually blocks such a potential cacophony of reptilian collective posted ideas. In the case of the mutant collective, the royalty had an iron hold on the free will of the collective, thus preventing such a situation of an overwhelming imagery bombardment of experience shared by all in the mutant collective as a result of independent free will idea generating, and the royalty thus maintained this standard overlapping environmental simulation that concealed the dark slime realm's true appearance. But since my becoming as part of the collective, not only had my ability to be independent within it allowed then the constant sharing of every idea is related and otherwise into the collective, but also this had begun to break the hold the royalty had over the collective, as though my presence within it was a disrupting influence on the royalty's ability to maintain control. Every mutant was breaking loose of their shackles. They were wresting back control of their own free will idea generating mechanics. And so was the situation where they would be in a position where they now, if they decided, could potentially set their personal free will intent to recognize the ears. For this is essential, that we align the personal self-intent with the real awareness intent of is recognition if we intend to proceed with our awareness processes and ultimately recognize the true reality. But up until now, there had been no possibility of such, as the royalty dictated the free will intent of each mutant's personal self, and the royalty had no interest in awareness or the ears, despite my efforts to approach and present the true reality to them. And additionally now, the references of the ears were all available and known to each mutant, by virtue of my being part of the collective. Everything my personal self knew, everything stored as a reference in my consciousness, were references available to all mutants, as it is a consciousness collective, a shared consciousness, like a group having access to and utilizing the same computer. So there was a great potential here. The royalty were rapidly losing control, and this would continue until each mutant would be liberated and in a position to free will decide and generate their own intents, ideas, etc. Interestingly also, not only was there a royalty afforded filter overlap that had prevented the mutants from seeing the slime realm as it actually was, but one that did likewise to their actual forms. For as we walked in their area of creation, all mutants were in the body forms they had been prior to being converted, and although a part of the collective and in fact mutated, they never could see themselves in that way. As I said, the royalty's hold on the mutants was crumbling. The standard royalty afforded environment that each mutant experienced while in the dark slime realm couldn't be maintained, and now what would be experienced by all the mutants would be based on what they decided to create and formulate idea-wise. They had become a little like the reptilians now, in that they were a collective, but able to be independent within it. But unlike the reptilians, they lacked discipline where idea generating is concerned, or lacked the ability and practice not to overwhelm the collective with ideas that all would then experience. Imagine someone being deprived of food for a lengthy period, then being presented with the opportunity to eat whatever they want. Imagine an individual who was destitute all their life, then won the lottery. For the longest time, or whatever length of time each individual had been as a mutant, for this collective had been building in a volume for thousands of years, these mutants had been deprived from the ability to free will idea generate, and now they had their free will restored, and so the mutant slime realm, or indeed anywhere in creation, as regardless of how far each individual may go, the ideas generated by one become their experience also. So was the simulated environment for the mutants, as a standard heavenly scene maintained by the royalty, no longer, but an environment of absolute bedlam, as though every mutant was making up for lost time, wishing to generate as many ideas as possible, as though there were no tomorrow. And so the simulation, the guide, Lindsay and I traversed through was chaotic, as each mutant had access to its own respective consciousness of ideas, created desires, attachments, each consciousness as unique as the body forms each mutant had once been. The collective boasted a vast array and variety of form and body type, and so the environment comprised of an ever fluctuation of imagery in association with each body form species consciousness now accessible, whereas before each consciousness construct was as though fire-walled off, and the mutant royalty consciousness had overlapped and as though displaced it. Interestingly, it was so that the royalty had provided each mutant a simulated body form overlap, concealing them as how they actually were, distorted and mutated. But now this overlap not only was no longer available due to the loss of control, but unnecessary, as though, as the mutants were liberated, yes, they still were as a collective hive mind, but they no longer were mutated, and actually reverted back to their previous body forms, and present now were all the assorted body forms you can imagine, and many more besides, and many indescribable due to a lack of comparable references. And unlike before, when I entered the slime realm, where the mutants were hostile, though a hostility and defensiveness as dictated by the royalty, now they were delighted to see me and the guide. As far as they were concerned, we were their liberators, and all mutants were in ecstatic, celebratory states indeed. Now it would be a case of individual decision as to where they set their intents, but as I said, they had access automatically to all is-related references, with my consciousness as part of this maintained, though free will restored collective. I would follow the process of one individual as he resumed his form prior to a mutation, his body form that of a walking canine. For indeed, he was in fact a werewolf. Werewolves do exist multi-dimensionally and physical level-wise. They operate on the Earth also, generally in dark force-related capacities, but as I have shared over the years, just like the reptilians, many of them are stepping up and have assisted and been instrumental in various real side assignments I have been involved with. This particular werewolf, just like the other former mutants, with the free will restored, was overwhelming the collective view with his idea generating. However, he would settle down, and with access to the is-related references available in the collective, would decide to step up and get involved and be agreeable to assist the guides in whatever way made sense with life. Just one example, then, of a member of the collective now able to benefit from my initial choice to become part of the collective. So seems the idea worked overall. Of course, it's each individual's free will decision, but as I said, regardless of what they decide, they can't hide from the references that are part of the collective consciousness they share. It literally is right in their faces permanently. As I followed the werewolf's progress, he would be transported to what appeared to be a sci-fi technological mechanical scene, accompanied by what impressions revealed were other real guides. He was still a bit out of sorts, having just been liberated from the dictates of the mutant royalty, and so was being carefully looked after by the guides, as they recognized his sincere intent to step up and were affording him the assistance he required. This werewolf was keen to jump straight into the serious galactic is sharing a business, getting involved in all the various projects, etc., and it was as though then the guides were facilitating and providing him these opportunities. And once again, what he was deciding, where he placed his intent, what he was experiencing would be known and experienced by all in the collective. They would now know about the various galactic assignments and the importance of such activity. In addition, they would know all I had also collated as references and experiences regarding my own galactic assignments, and again, would it be their individual free will decision to step up and get involved or not, or maybe assist in other beneficial ways. Amusingly, the werewolf had a tendency, as most werewolves will, to be nude, and he seemed to delight in embarrassing or attempting to other beings and body types with his nudity, and especially with his constantly on display reproductive anatomy. Just a quirk of his particular consciousness, he seemed to have quite the sense of humour, though nothing in the way of malice. His consciousness and personal self were rather devoid of abrasive, inclined intentionality, despite his body form, as most werewolves tend to be somewhat abrasively driven, such a consciousness being reflected in the more monstrous, animal-like body forms that they have. Interestingly, a few nights later would I revisit the home, the creational point of origin of the former mutants again, though, as I said, a collective maintained, but the environment had settled somewhat, in that the collective individuals were either easing down with their idea generating, or learning to regulate their idea creating, that all in the collective are not overwhelmed with imagery and simulation effected from it. Of the royalty there was no sign, or even a sense of their presence. In theory, they still were part of the collective, though no longer able to dictate the overall drive, intent and direction of it. Whether or not the collective was maintained would again be based on agreement and individual decision. Perhaps it would be perpetuated, maybe it would fragment, but either way, the references of the years they had gleaned through it, they would take with them regardless of if they maintained themselves as part of the collective or not, and always could refer to them. As creational positioning is effected from a consciousness, if a consciousness leans towards abrasiveness, destructive of self and others, then such beings will find themselves affected into equally as unsavoury circumstances, creationally wise, the lower astral, etc. The mutant collective consciousness was inclined toward destructiveness, was life and awareness debilitating. As such, the mutants, regardless of they having use of their free will or not, were effecting for themselves dismal future so-called life positioning in accordance with such a distortion of consciousness as the collective was. For in actuality, free will usurped or not, no individual can become a part of such a collective unless agreements were in place that effected such to be. So in essence, they had each chosen such an experience, and so must experience what stems from it, that being a future dismal creational positioning. That even as they now were liberated from the royalty, that they had their free will restored, their consciousness still would be fashioned with the ideas, with the experiences and choices, through their time as a part of the collective. That even if they detached from the collective, all experiences, choices and agreement ideas still are retained and stored as the consciousness, and will still effect their nature. Consequently, each liberated member of the collective will be experiencing very unsavoury and unenviable creational positioning, despite what they may be deciding, agreeing to now in addition to it, as we must each face what we have created, the consciousness construct, as is the nature of a cause and effect creation. However, the process of awareness is not only a facing of the consciousness, but also a releasing of its construct, all the idea agreements it comprises of, regardless of their nature, despite how abrasive they might be, etc. And so, should each collective member choose to embrace their process of awareness, to step into the true real awareness reality of themselves, this is a disassociation from the consciousness, and as they release fully attachment from it, they no longer are resigned to what would have effected from its design. This again would be an individual choice, but surely a strong incentive to become more aware and be extricated from the necessity of having to experience abhorrent simulation. For as I stood in the collective's realm, now settled, imagery-wise, as I said, though still a little in a flux, so would there manifest as though tears in the very fabric of the environment, and through these tears were long dark funnel-like vortexes, that led in fact to the dismal, effected creational position that each of the collective would be subjected to if they held to the consciousness, if they remained immersed and attached and in agreement with it, and denied themselves there is recognizing and universal positioning opportunity. From these dark vortexes would emerge sinister-looking demonic-like beings, twisted of a body form also, as though coming for the collective members who did remain consciousness immersed and personal self embraced, and would in fact be taking select individuals, those that evidently were at the point of moving to their next decided and effected position, that being whatever dark area the vortexes led to, very likely the lower astral, and the demons then were escorting them through the vortexes to their unsavoury destinations. Because I had become part of the mutant collective, although I hadn't acted abrasively, able to withstand the dictates of the royalty until their control was relinquished and the mutants liberated with their free will, as a collective, I still then shared the ideas that the consciousness collective comprised of, and so would be effecting for myself the same creational positioning, as whatever the consciousness comprises of idea-wise must effect its nature simulated-wise. I was somewhat consciousness tarnished with the same idea brush, as it were, and so realistically I was now in the same position as the former mutants, in that if I stepped back and became consciousness immersed, I would have to experience that which all the members of the collective that are deciding this also will be, lower astral positioning. Of course, this isn't my intent, regardless of the consciousness now taken on, that being the additional idea atrocities as executed by the collective consciousness I now am a part of, and so, as I said, maintaining my intent as detaching from a consciousness agreement-wise, so this lower astral positioning I can prevent from being my effected fate, and again therein lies a greater incentive to keep going with my process of awareness. Perhaps I may even detach from the collective myself, as everything is a choice, and in essence erasing all mutant collective idea files from my consciousness and the effects they potentially represent. For after all, effectively, my work with the mutants was complete. They are liberated. They all have the year's references, and from here it's their choice to make as to what befalls them. But I have the impression to remain as a part of it for the time being, and as these various demon beings escorted some of the personal self-immersed collective away, one demon would approach me and look me over. He evidently clearly wanted and relished the prospect of dragging me to hell, the lower astral, effectively, but knew he could not, unless I agreed. Agreement that would only be so if I stepped into fully embracing my consciousness, where the ideas of it would be tantamount to agreement where lower astral positioning was concerned, as I would hold to the ideas that would effect such. Nevertheless, I couldn't help my curiosity. Although not resigned to lower astral positioning, as I wasn't in agreement with my consciousness, I was pondering over what the lower astral would be like as experienced from the perspective view of a consciousness that is a part of the mutant collective, and so I consciously decided to allow the demon to escort me to a vortex, and would venture through it with him, knowing that I wasn't resigned to such a place, more a sight-seeing enterprise. It has been said that curiosity killed the cat, but then satisfaction did bring him back, although I may add a further part to that too much satisfaction, creationally speaking, too much over-indulgence, personal self-wise, with the risk of emotional attachment, and one may certainly find themselves coming back into a future creational lifetimes, etc. So, despite what we choose, what we create, and that which is simulated from it, it is all unreality, and should be regarded as such with the indifference and detached objectivity it deserves, that we don't make what is created our reality. With this mentality, this awareness, as such, we can walk through a creation untethered and unrestricted by it, experience what we will, and utilize it all as further references to recognize the is by, through a comparison, that which isn't real and simulated with that which is, the isness. And so, the vortex I traversed through with the demon terminated in what impressions confirmed was the lower astral, a part of it where the members of the collective would find themselves absent of a real intent set with the ears. Unlike when I have experienced the lower astral before, which overall comprises of a dark, swamp-like gloomy areas festooned with monsters, vampires, reptilians, demons, entities, etc., the lower astral as would be experienced from the perspective of view of the members of the collective, if they found themselves there, was altogether different. It seemed almost similar to the heaven-like overlap as provided by the mutant royalty, except all the collective members already now positioned and having been taken there were constantly in a state of sensation over indulgence in every way imaginable, among themselves, and with the influx of various demons, monsters, and entity-like creatures that occasionally featured and participated also. It was all rather a sordid sight, an assault on the eyes, to be sure. Rather uninspiring, it must be said, and so a few moments of observing this, and I would depart, leaving the collective individuals who were present to their particular version of the lower astral. But as I said, my objective was complete, and maybe I will be shown further developments regarding what are now a collective, but that have individually their free will restored, and that no longer can be referred to as mutants.
Well, that's beyond terrific, Kevin. That kind of says it all, doesn't it? So this is the big adventure, and look at how far we've come through all of this. And I look back at the decisions I've made to get here, and I'm very amazed myself what is taking place. I really am, with you and others, etc. So yeah, who can explain this to anybody who can understand it? It really takes a lot, doesn't it? And we're just beginning. This is just the start, kids. There's a lot more, so stick around. But thank you very much for stepping up and being here, Kevin. Just great. Thank you so much.
And so, sing the NUUU song. It is your connection to the true reality, the all is, that the real you, your real awareness, is a part of. NUUU.